It's part 4 of our conversation with the great Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. I'm John Beaudin from Rock History Music. Silent Singing is the brand new book. It's a book of lyrics and rare photos, and there are many different versions of the book that you can buy. Some are signed. Links in the description of this video. It's all the lyrics from Jethro Tull and Ian Anderson's solo stuff. I've seen some of the pictures. They've never been seen before. It's the 40th anniversary of this one, one of my favorite albums. Some of my friends didn't like this one. I love this album. And the 50th anniversary of Jethro Tull's biggest album, Aqualung. We talked to Ian Anderson of Jethro Tull. What was it about 1971? I mean, it was some of the greatest albums of all time were released that year.
In record company terms, it was a pretty competitive time to be marketing and promoting new material, because you were up against the good and the great, who were releasing albums at a furious rate, throughout the early 70s. And it was a tough sell if you were moving towards the Christmas period and you're up against, the new Elton John album or whatever it might be. So, arguably, there was an excitement in the air. There was a huge amount of creativity in the air. There was a demand for, what we took for granted, physical product. People wanted to own an LP, big thing with big artwork, and it was a very fruitful time for a great number of artists in a lot of countries. But I think it was a coming of age, really, at the end of the 60s, which was, if you take the mid 60s, I mean, if you take the Freedom March in Alabama, if you take that as a time where it began to kickstart globally a real awareness of change, it led on to, apart from the racist and racial divide, it led on to the emancipation to a large degree, whether they would accept that has in fact occurred. But, for women, there was a degree of freedom that was coming about. Women were able to make choices about contraceptives, about going to school, getting an education, about looking for careers. There was a huge growth, I argue, mid-60s, through the end of the 70s was a pretty revolutionary period globally, because it wasn't just the UK or the USA. It wasn't just in Western Europe. We were seeing things radically beginning to change in the countries that were more historically related to fascism and dictatorships, and even as we went through the 80s, then the growing need for some kind of a democracy in Russia and the breakup of the Soviet Union. Yeah. We saw these changes coming about. So it was a very productive time of mostly quiet revolution in global society, starting first in the US and the UK, spreading through Europe, spreading through other parts of the world, and only finally, maybe at the end of the 80s, getting to, or being able to be accessed in Russia, and then later on in countries of South America, for example. It was I think that came about partly because of the freedom of expression in music and the arts, but it also was reflected in music and the arts because we were writing about the stuff that we saw that was change. So I don't think you could say that rock music changed the world. The world changed rock music to pretty much a similar degree. I think it was a very symbiotic relationship between rock music and the way things changed. In Russia, I know that to be the case because lots of people a bit younger than me grew up at a time when it was absolutely forbidden to have Western rock music. It had to be smuggled in on tapes that were copies of tapes that were copies of tapes. Yeah. So, in many countries in Eastern Europe and in the countries that were part of the Soviet Union, it was absolutely prohibited. But under Gorbachev's enlightened period of glasnost and perestroika, the Russian state record label, Melodia Records, was allowed to release the first two Western albums, which were the Beatles, and a best of album by Jethro Tull.
Wow.
We were the first. That was in 1977, and sorry, that was in 1987.
Right.
In 1987, and that was a period when already Elton John, I think, had been to Russia to do some concerts. A few Western acts had gone there, but they were playing in venues absolutely controlled by and only open to party members. The apparatchiks, those who had special access or knew somebody who did, who would palm them a ticket in return for something else. So they weren't open to the general public. And we turned down, or I turned down the offers to go and perform in Russia for that very specific reason. I said, well, no, not unless I know people really can go out and buy a ticket, regardless of, political belief or social status. I don't want to go to be playing simply to the Communist Party upper echelon. That defeats the whole point. So we didn't go until a bit later on, and thanks to Gorbachev, these things came about, at least for a period of time. And I've been to Russia many times since, and obviously during the time that Vladimir Vladimirovich has been the boss man.
Mm-hmm.
And, we were supposed to actually do a Russian tour last spring. That was postponed to this spring, and now it's postponed to the early months of 2022. So we are due to go once again, and I have to be very careful what I say about Vladimir Vladimirovich.
Yeah.